of anything that I've ever tried to do with a team, I was probably the most naive about this. When you think about taking, a group of 40 or 50 people into a closed communist country, where do you start?
My initial reaction was just excitement, really. I guess I didn't really understand what we were getting into.
None of us really had any idea what we were getting into. We heard it and we were obviously very excited. We were going to get to go on this trip with our entire team. We got to take 60 people, American Christians, into an atheist communist country that Americans are not supposed to go into. I mean, that's a pretty incredible experience.
Incredible and ambitious. It all started when Baylor baseball coach Steve Smith read an article about the prospect of college baseball teams going to Cuba for service work. Coach Smith was intrigued and began looking into the possibility of Baylor being one of those teams. He contacted Baylor Associate Professor Dr. L.M. Dyson, who has been traveling to Cuba for over 10 years. With Dyson's help, the plan was put into motion, and despite the miles of red tape and Cuba's restrictive practices, the trip eventually became a reality.
The Cuban government was very open to it. That's one thing that immediately sort of touched me and amazed me. Even though they're a communist government and they are, I'll use the word proudly atheist. They are open to faith-based groups coming into their country if it will help their people.
Baylor was granted entry into Cuba under a humanitarian license, and the plan was to help renovate an old ballpark and squeeze in some baseball in their free time. Once the details were ironed out, the focus turned to transporting the entire team to Cuba, which from Waco is quite a task, so much so that the journey started at 1:30 in the morning.
Most of the guys decided we're just going to stay up. We wouldn't be able to sleep in anticipation of leaving the next day, so we stayed up till 1:30, went and got on the bus, and drove to Dallas, and flew from Dallas to Miami, and the whole time we're thinking, oh, we'll be able to sleep. Well, no. We were so excited about the trip. All we're thinking about is getting to Cuba.
I think the plan was to sleep the entire travel, that'd be our night of sleep, and it didn't really work out that way. We were kind of excited when we first left, so we didn't get much sleep, the bus to Dallas or the plane flight.
And I'll tell you, by the time we got to Miami, we were walking zombies. It was, bloodshot eyes. The whole team was just dragging.
Suffice to say, it was a rough first day. But after the team met their hosts and got some sleep, they set off for the ballpark, where they quickly realized it was going to be a bigger job than they'd expected.
This would be just a typical park and rec center in the United States that had just been run down. We basically had 3 crews on that. We divided into 3 groups, and we had one group working the field, one group working basketball, really replacing backboards. When I had been there before, the day I was there walking through this place, there was probably junior high age kids having a practice on one of those courts with their coach, and they're shooting at a backboard that's wooden slats with no goal, no rim, and they're having practice. So we were able to do a lot with that.
We were hauling load after load of dirt onto that field and water. There was no running water. We're taking it from the bathroom in a wheelbarrow and buckets out there to build the mound. And when we first got there, if you had filled the baselines with water, you could have driven a small boat down them. They were literally a foot deep, and it was probably, we probably carried 50 to 100 loads of wheelbarrows of dirt.
And when you put a bunch of baseball players on a baseball field, it doesn't take long to get baseball. Throughout the experience, the Baylor players spent ample time interacting with the Cuban locals on the diamond.
Everything that we did from a baseball standpoint basically had to be done under the umbrella of a humanitarian license. So all of our baseball was really with them. And in some cases, their coaches even ran some workout where they're hitting ground balls, and you've got a Baylor guy stand next to a Cuban guy, and our coaches are not even involved in it. We're just watching.
And though for the most part there was a language barrier, the Americans and the Cubans had at least one thing in common.
Sometimes we couldn't communicate too well. Hand motions are great, and after that, we just start putting together as many Spanish words as we can. If we know a few, we try and put them together, and they know a couple English words. And as far as baseball goes, we spoke the same language as them on that.
To be completely honest, they probably showed us more than we showed them. The 10-year-olds there know more fastball grips than I've ever seen before. And just how they're brought up, every boy in Cuba plays baseball. And we watched a Little League game on the field that we worked on right afterwards. And I mean, these kids were probably 7 or 8 years old, but they were, doing things that I'm just learning in the game right now, and they already understood.
When the work on the ballpark and rec center was finished, hundreds of people showed up immediately to use the facilities. And before long, the Baylor players realized that the trip had become much more than just fixing up a baseball field. They found inspiration in a people that were happy in a world much different from their own.
I think that they probably come back with some degree of admiration for the guys that they met and the people that they met there, and how content they are and how at peace they are in a place that we would find to be very restrictive. We are so used to freedoms that we just simply take for granted that they don't have.
It was so apparent that their joy was, in their faith, and their hope was in heaven and not on things they had on earth. And that was just really encouraging to me. And I almost felt guilty at a point because, I just take so much for granted that I have here and all the freedoms that I have here. When we hopped on the flight from Cuba to Miami, and it's a 30 or 40-minute flight, and it almost feels like you just jump to the future, just by how much things are different from here and there. And as soon as we got to Miami, it was just kind of like a relief. Like, man, I'm back, and I can't believe where I've been, and look how blessed we are. I'm drinking this water out of a water fountain. Just simple things like that.
Since the Cuba trip, things have changed at Baylor. The team is closer on a personal level and more cohesive as a whole.
You don't go to Cuba to team build. You don't go to Cuba to build chemistry on a team. But when you go somewhere and that length of time and that type of a trip and that amount of travel that's involved and everything that's got to go on, you come back a different person and you come back a different team. And the relationships I think that our coaches have with our players now are different. The relationships that they have with each other are different. And that's just a byproduct of the whole experience.
I learned a lot about a lot of my teammates that I didn't really know. Besides your roommates, the people you live with, you know everyone on your team really well on a baseball level, not really on a personal level. And I learned a lot about guys on a personal level and really have more of an intimate relationship with them now.
I've really thought about one of the most unique things I think we have in our sport of baseball is the mound visit. There's not really many sports where the coach goes to the middle of the field with one guy and a catcher, and has a talk in front of everybody. That meeting will be changed because of this trip. The dynamics of that practice has changed, and that's not something that I really anticipated. And I don't know that I totally understand it yet and can put my arms around it, but I know it's different.
For Big12Sports.com, I'm Wendell Barnhouse.